Hello everyone, and welcome back to English in Fluency, the perfect place for you to practice your listening skills and improve your English understanding step by step. I am your host, Alex, and today we have a very special and extensive journey for you. We are going to explore the power of storytelling in a way you might not have experienced before. You might be wondering, why storytelling? Well, stories are the heart of human communication. When you understand a story in a new language, you are not just learning words, you are learning culture, emotion, and the natural flow of conversation. Today, we are going to follow multiple narratives, continuous stories that weave together different aspects of life, and I will guide you through them, explaining the important parts as we go. This is B1 level practice, which means the English will be clear, natural, but not too fast, perfect for intermediate learners who want to reach the next level. We will cover mysteries, everyday interactions, and even a puzzle or two. So, find a comfortable spot, maybe grab a cup of tea, and let's dive into the world of narratives together. Imagine for a moment that you are walking down a busy street in a city you have never visited before. The air is cool, and the sky is a brilliant, clear blue. You see people rushing to work, cars honking in the distance, and the smell of fresh bread coming from a nearby bakery. This is how our first story begins, with a character named Elena. Elena had just moved to the city of Riverton 3 days ago. She was sitting on a wooden bench in the center of the town square, holding a folded piece of paper in her hands. Her expression was a mix of worry and determination. She looked at the paper, then looked up at the tall buildings surrounding her, and then back at the paper. She seemed lost, but not just geographically lost. She looked like she was searching for something much more important than a street name. Let's pause here for a moment and look at the word determination. When I say Elena had determination, I mean she had made a strong decision to do something, and she was not going to let anything stop her. It is a very useful word to describe character. If you are learning English, using words like determination instead of just saying she wanted to do it makes your speaking much richer and more descriptive. In B1 level English, we start to use these more specific nouns to describe abstract feelings. So, Elena was determined. She was on a mission. The narrative hook here is the paper. What is on that paper? Why is it so important to her? This is the question that drives the story forward. As we continue, I want you to focus on the verbs of movement and the adjectives describing her feelings. Elena stood up from the bench, smoothing out the wrinkles in her long gray coat. She took a deep breath, the kind of breath you take before you jump into cold water. She looked at the paper one last time. It was an old map, drawn by hand in fading blue ink. It wasn't a normal map of roads and highways. Instead, it showed paths through gardens, shortcuts behind libraries, and a big circle drawn around a place simply labeled the sanctuary. Elena whispered to herself, "I know it's here somewhere. He wouldn't have left me a map to nowhere." Her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the noise of the city traffic. She put the map into her pocket and began to walk towards the old district of Riverton, where the cobblestone streets replaced the smooth asphalt. Now, I want you to notice the detail in the environment. We moved from the busy street to the old district, with cobblestone streets. This change in setting tells us something about the mood. Cobblestone streets suggest history, the past, and perhaps a slower pace. The writer is using the setting to show us that Elena is moving away from the modern, noisy world and into a place of memories. Also, did you hear the phrase, swallowed by the noise? This is a figurative expression. Her voice wasn't literally eaten, but the noise was so loud that her soft voice disappeared into it. These expressions are very common in storytelling, and understanding them is key to following narratives in English. Let's follow Elena as she enters the quieter part of the city. As Elena walked, the sounds of the city faded behind her. The tall glass buildings gave way to shorter brick buildings with iron balconies filled with red flowers. She walked for about 20 minutes, checking the map occasionally. She turned left at a small bookstore called The Paper Tiger, and then right past a fountain that was no longer working. The water was stagnant, covered in green moss. She stopped. According to the map, this was the spot. But there was nothing here except an old rusty gate leading to an overgrown garden. She pushed the gate, and it creaked loudly, the sound echoing in the silent afternoon. "Hello?" she called out. "Is anyone here?" There was no answer, just the sound of the wind rustling the dry leaves. This part of the story uses a lot of sensory details. We hear the gate creak, we see the green moss, and we hear the wind. When you are listening to a story, try to create a movie in your head. Can you picture the rusty gate? Can you hear the sound it makes? This is called visualization, and it helps you remember the story better. Also, notice the past tense verbs: walked, turned, stopped, pushed. The narrative is firmly in the past, telling us a sequence of events. Sequence is the order in which things happen. First she walked, then she turned, then she stopped. Understanding this sequence is vital for following the plot. Let's see what Elena finds inside that garden. She stepped through the gate carefully. The grass was tall, reaching her knees. In the center of the garden, hidden behind a large willow tree, there was a small stone statue. It was a statue of a cat, sitting proudly with its tail wrapped around its paws. Elena walked up to it, her heart beaten a little faster. She knelt down and looked at the base of the statue. There was a small inscription carved into the stone. It was hard to read because of the dirt and time. She pulled a tissue from her pocket and gently wiped the stone. The letters became clear. It read, "For those who seek, the answer lies not in the destination, but in the journey." Look up. Elena frowned. She stood up and looked up at the sky. It was just blue sky and the branches of the willow tree. "Look up," she repeated. "What am I supposed to see?" Here we have a mystery. The inscription is a riddle. A riddle is a puzzle or a question that requires clever thinking to solve. The text says, "The answer lies not in the destination, but in the journey." This is a very common theme in literature. It means that what you experience while trying to achieve a goal is more important than the goal itself. Elena, however, is confused. She is looking for a physical answer. The story creates tension here. Tension is the feeling of excitement or anxiety about what will happen next. We, the listeners, are asking the same question as Elena. What is she supposed to see? Let's continue to see if she can solve this riddle. Elena walked around the statue, scanning the tree branches above her. Suddenly, a small, colorful bird flew out from the leaves, startling her. She stepped back and tripped over a loose stone. She fell to the ground with a thud. "Ouch," she muttered, rubbing her elbow. As she sat up, she noticed something shiny half buried in the dirt where she had fallen. It was a small, silver key. She picked it up and examined it. It was old and heavy, with a strange symbol on the handle. A circle with a line through it. She looked back at the statue, then at the key. Was this what she was looking for? Or was it just a coincidence? She remembered the map. The big circle labeled the sanctuary wasn't just a place. The circle matched the symbol on the key. This is a turning point in the narrative. A turning point is a moment when the story changes direction. Elena found something unexpected because she fell. Sometimes in stories, accidents lead to discoveries. The vocabulary here includes words like startling, which means surprising or scaring someone suddenly, and coincidence, which means a surprising occurrence of events that happen at the same time by accident, but seem to have some connection. Now, Elena has a key. This is a classic narrative element, the key to the mystery. It propels the story forward. What does the key open? We need to know more. Let's follow Elena as she tries to find a lock that fits this key. Elena stood up, brushing the dirt off her coat. She held the key tightly in her hand. She looked around the garden again, but this time she looked for a door, a box, or a gate. There was nothing but the statue, the tree, and the overgrown bushes. She felt a wave of disappointment. It can't end here, she thought. She walked back to the fountain outside the gate. She looked at the dry, mossy basin. Something about the fountain drew her attention. The center of the fountain had a decorative fish, its mouth open as if it was spouting water. But there was no water. Elena climbed onto the edge of the fountain, ignoring the sign that said, "Keep off." She looked into the fish's mouth. It was dark inside, but she could see a small keyhole on the roof of the fish's stone mouth. Her hands trembled as she reached out and inserted the silver key. It fit perfectly. She turned the key, and a loud clicking sound echoed through the empty square. The suspense is building. Notice how the story shifts from the garden back to the fountain. This is called a flashback, or rather, a return to a previous location with new knowledge. We learn that the fountain was not just scenery, it was part of the puzzle. The phrase, "keep off," is a command often seen on signs. It means do not touch or do not enter. Elena ignores it, which shows her determination again. She is breaking a small rule to achieve her goal. The description of her hands trembling shows her emotion, excitement and fear mixed together. Now, let's see what happens when she turns the key. The sound of the click is the trigger for the next event. Slowly, the stone fish began to move. It didn't swim away, of course, but a small compartment opened in the base of the fountain, just below the fish. It was a hidden drawer. Elena jumped down from the fountain edge and peered inside. There was a small wooden box, polished and clean, unlike the dirty fountain. She lifted the box out. It was light. She opened the lid. Inside, there was no gold, no money, and no jewels. There was only a single, folded letter and a photograph. Elena picked up the photograph first. It showed a young man and a young woman standing right in this very square, laughing. The man was her grandfather, the one who had given her the map before he passed away. The woman was someone Elena had never seen before. She picked up the letter and began to read. This is the emotional climax of the story. We finally discover the purpose of the journey. The description of the box as polished and clean, unlike the dirty fountain, creates a contrast. Contrast is when two things are very different from each other. It highlights that the contents of the box are valuable and cared for. The revelation involves her grandfather. This connects the plot to Elena's personal life, making the story meaningful to her. The story is not just about finding a box. It is about her connection to her past. As she reads the letter, we will finally understand why she came here. The letter was written in her grandfather's handwriting. It read, "Dear Elena, if you are reading this, it means you followed the map. I knew you would. You always were the curious one. This woman in the photo is your grandmother, the one you never met. She loved this city, and she loved this square. Before she died, she asked me to hide this memory here, so that one day you would come and find it. She wanted you to know that you come from a long line of strong, adventurous women. The sanctuary is not a place on a map. The sanctuary is the feeling you get when you discover something new. I am proud of you, my dear. Keep exploring." Tears welled up in Elena's eyes. She wasn't looking for treasure. She was looking for a connection to her family. She held the photo to her chest and smiled through her tears. This is the resolution. The mystery is solved. The sanctuary was a metaphor, not a physical building. A metaphor is when you say one thing but mean another to show a similarity. The grandfather explains that the sanctuary is a feeling. This resolves the confusion Elena had earlier about the riddle. The emotions here are strong: tears, smiling, holding the photo. We see a change in Elena. At the beginning, she was worried and determined. Now, she is peaceful and happy. She has found what she needed. The narrative arc is complete. We followed her from the bench, to the garden, to the fountain, and finally to the emotional realization. This structure is typical of storytelling. Introduction, rising action, climax, and resolution. Now let's take a step back and analyze how we followed this story. Understanding narratives step by step is a skill. First, we identified the character and her goal. Elena wanted to find the sanctuary. Then, we followed the obstacles, like the confusing map and the overgrown garden. We paid attention to the setting, which changed from busy to quiet, mirroring her internal journey. We looked for clues, like the riddle and the key. And finally, we interpreted the resolution, which was emotional rather than material. When you are listening to English stories, try to identify these elements. Ask yourself, who is the main character? What do they want? What is stopping them? How do they overcome it? These questions will help you stay focused and understand the plot. Let's review some of the key vocabulary we encountered in this story. We learned determination, which means having a firm purpose. We saw coincidence, which describes events happening by chance. We discussed setting, which is where and when the story takes place. We looked at flashback and metaphor. These are essential words for discussing literature and stories, but in everyday English, we also use these concepts. For example, if you say, "I have the determination to learn English," you are using that vocabulary. If you say, "My room is a mess, but my desk is clean," you are using contrast. If you say, "Life is a journey," you are using a metaphor. Learning these words in the context of a story makes them easier to remember. I want you to practice a little bit now. I am going to describe a short situation using some of the vocabulary we learned. I want you to try to visualize it in your mind. Imagine a character named Julian. Julian is a chef. He has a goal. He wants to cook the perfect meal for his family. He is in his kitchen. It is hot and steamy. He is chopping vegetables quickly. He feels nervous because the water for the pasta is boiling over. He has the determination to fix it. He turns down the heat and stirs the pot. Suddenly, the phone rings. It is a coincidence. He answers it. It is his sister, saying she is arriving early. Julian smiles. He feels a rush of excitement. The kitchen, which was chaotic a moment ago, now feels like a place of creativity. Did you visualize that? That was a micro-narrative. It had a character, a goal, a conflict, and a resolution, all in a few sentences. Now, let's expand on this idea of following narratives. Sometimes, when you listen to English, the speed can be a problem. But if you focus on the structure, you can predict what comes next. In Elena's story, when she found the key, we predicted it would open something. We didn't know what, but we knew it was a key. When she read the riddle, we knew she had to solve it. Training your brain to predict is a powerful listening strategy. You don't need to understand every single word to understand the flow. If you miss a word, keep listening. The context will often fill in the blanks. For instance, if I say, "He took his umbrella because it was going to," you can predict the next word is rain based on the context. Stories are full of these predictive clues. Let's return to Elena one last time to close the loop. After she found the photo, she didn't just leave. She sat by the fountain for a while. She watched the people walking by. She realized that the city wasn't so strange anymore. By connecting with her grandfather's past, she had made the city her own. She stood up, put the photo and letter safely in her bag, and walked back towards the busy street. But this time, she didn't look lost. She walked with confidence. The sun was setting, casting long shadows on the pavement. She had found her sanctuary, and in doing so, she had found a piece of herself. The story ends here, but Elena's life continues. This is what we call an open ending. It leaves the reader or listener thinking about what might happen next. Will she explore more of the city? Will she learn more about her grandmother? We don't know, but the narrative gives us hope. To help you practice further, I am going to tell another short story now. This one will be a bit different. It will be about a misunderstanding, which is a very common theme in language learning. Listen carefully to how the characters communicate and how the problem is resolved. Remember to visualize the scene and pay attention to the feelings. Our second story takes place in a small coffee shop. The main character is a man named David. David is an artist. He is sitting at a table sketching in his notebook. He is wearing a bright yellow scarf. He looks very focused. Across the room, a woman named Sarah is watching him. Sarah thinks David looks familiar. She thinks he might be an old friend from university named Mark. She gathers her courage, picks up her coffee, and walks over to his table. "Excuse me," she says. "Are you Mark?" David looks up, startled. He smiles politely and says, "No, I'm David, but I get that a lot. I must have a Mark kind of face." Sarah blushes, embarrassed. "I'm so sorry," she says. "You look exactly like him. I thought it was a wonderful coincidence seeing him here." Let's stop here. We have a classic mistaken identity scenario. The vocabulary here includes familiar, which means known or recognized. Sarah thought David was familiar. She was embarrassed, which means feeling shy or ashamed. The dialogue is natural. David makes a joke, saying he has a Mark kind of face. This is a friendly way to diffuse the awkwardness. In English culture, making a joke when someone makes a mistake is a common way to make the other person feel comfortable. Now, let's see how the story develops from this awkward beginning. David laughs gently. "Don't worry about it," he says. "Actually, my name is David. I'm an artist." He gestures to his sketchbook. Sarah looks at the drawing. It is a beautiful sketch of the coffee shop, but with a giant dragon sleeping in the corner. "Wow," Sarah says, her embarrassment fading quickly. "That's amazing. You draw dragons in coffee shops?" David nods. "I draw what I see," he jokes. "And I see a very tired dragon trying to drink an espresso." Sarah laughs. The tension is gone. They start talking about art and imagination. They realize they both love fantasy stories. The coincidence of the mistaken identity turns into a connection over shared interests. This story shows how a narrative can turn on a single interaction. The conflict was the embarrassment of the mistaken identity. The resolution was the conversation about the drawing. We used words like gestures, which means hand movements, and fading, which means disappearing. The transition from embarrassment to laughter is a narrative arc in itself. These small, everyday narratives happen all the time. When you speak English, you are telling stories. You tell stories about your day, your weekend, your childhood. Understanding how to structure these small stories is just as important as understanding big adventures like Elena's. Think about your own life. Can you tell a story about a time you were lost? Or a time you found something unexpected? Try to use the structure we discussed. Start with the setting. "I was walking in the park last Sunday." Introduce the character, which is you. "I was feeling happy." Then, introduce the event. "Suddenly, I saw a dog running towards me." Add details. The dog was small and brown, and it was carrying a shoe. Then, the resolution. "The owner came running up, apologized, and we laughed about it." Practicing these short narratives will build your fluency. It trains your brain to think in past tense and to organize events in order. Now, we are going to shift gears again. We are going to explore a different kind of narrative. A story that focuses on interactions between people and how misunderstandings can lead to unexpected friendships in a travel setting. This is a very common theme in English literature and in real life. Understanding how characters speak to each other, their tone, and their hidden meanings is a huge part of mastering listening skills. So, let's take a deep breath, focus our minds, and step into a new story. Our third story takes place in a very different setting from the quiet gardens of Riverton or the cozy coffee shop. Imagine a busy train station. It is late in the afternoon. The sun is beginning to set, cast into golden-orange light through the large glass windows of the station. The air is filled with the sound of announcements over the loudspeaker, the rolling wheels of suitcases on the pavement, and the chatter of hundreds of people. In the middle of this chaos stands a man named Julian. Julian is a musician. He is carrying a large black guitar case on his back and a small suitcase in his hand. He looks a bit disheveled, which means his hair is messy, and his clothes are slightly wrinkled. He has just finished a long tour and is trying to get home. He is tired, his eyes are heavy, and all he wants is to find the right platform for his train. Let's pause for a moment to analyze the description. When we describe a setting, we use sensory words to make the listener feel like they are there. I mentioned the golden orange light and the rolling wheels. This creates an atmosphere. The atmosphere here is busy and slightly chaotic. I also described Julian as disheveled. This is a fantastic B1 level adjective. It describes someone who looks untidy, usually because they are tired or have been traveling. When you hear a word like this, you can often guess the meaning from the context. He finished a long tour, he is tired, his hair is messy. Therefore, disheveled must mean messy or untidy. Using context clues is your best tool when listening to a new story. Now, let's see what happens to Julian in this crowded station. Julian walked towards the large electronic board that listed all the departures. He was looking for the 6:15 p.m. train to his hometown, a small village called Oakhaven. He scanned the list. 6 p.m. to the city, 6:10 p.m. to the coast, 6:15 p.m. to… Wait, there was no Oakhaven. He blinked and looked again. The space next to 6:15 p.m. was blank. A wave of anxiety washed over him. He checked his watch. It was 5:45 p.m. He had 30 minutes, but he didn't know where to go. He looked around for an information desk. He saw a small booth with a woman inside, typing on a computer. He walked over quickly. "Excuse me," he said, his voice slightly hoarse from singing the night before. The woman didn't look up. She was focused on her screen. "Excuse me," he repeated, a little louder this time. The woman held up a finger, signaling him to wait. Julian shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He was impatient. This scene sets up a conflict. The conflict is not just that the train isn't on the board, but also the difficulty in communication. The woman at the booth is busy. Notice the phrase, "a wave of anxiety washed over him." This is an idiom. It means he suddenly felt anxious. Idioms are common in storytelling. They paint a picture of an emotion. Also, notice the woman's action. She held up a finger. Nonverbal communication is very important in narratives. She didn't say, "Wait," she showed it. When you listen to stories, pay attention to these small actions described by the narrator. They tell you about the character's attitude. Is she rude? Is she just busy? The text says she was focused on her screen, which suggests she isn't trying to be rude, she is just occupied. But Julian feels impatient. This difference in perspective creates tension. Finally, the woman looked up. She had sharp glasses and a tired expression. "Yes?" she asked abruptly. Julian leaned forward. "I am looking for the 6:15 train to Oakhaven. It's not on the board. Has it been cancelled?" The woman sighed and typed something into her computer. "Oakhaven," she muttered. "There is no 6:15 to Oakhaven today. Engineering works. There is a replacement bus service." Julian's shoulders dropped. "A bus? Where from?" The woman pointed vaguely to the left. "Platform 1, outside. But you had better hurry. It leaves in 10 minutes. Julian felt a spike of panic. 10 minutes? But Platform 1 is at the other end of the station. The woman shrugged. "Then you should run," she said, and returned to her typing. Julian grabbed his suitcase tighter and began to run. We have a clear sequence of events here. First, the inquiry, then the bad news, and finally the rush. The vocabulary replacement bus service is very common in travel contexts. It implies that a train isn't running, usually due to maintenance or engineering works. Julian's reaction is described physically. His shoulders dropped. This is a universal sign of disappointment or defeat. We also see the woman's attitude through her dialogue. She speaks in short sentences. Yes? Then you should run. This tells us she is not very helpful or friendly. In a story, Side characters like this often serve as obstacles. They don't have to be villains, but they make the main character's journey harder. Now, Julian has to run. This adds a physical element to the narrative. Let's follow him. Julian weaved through the crowd, muttering, "Sorry, excuse me," as he bumped into people. His guitar case knocked against a trash can, making a hollow sound. He hoped his guitar was okay. It was his most precious possession. He reached the stairs leading to platform 1. There was no elevator. He had to carry his heavy suitcase down the stairs. As he was hurrying down, he saw a woman coming up the stairs. She was carrying 2 large bags and a cup of coffee. In his haste, Julian didn't see her properly. His suitcase wheel caught on the edge of her bag. He stumbled, and the woman gasped. The coffee cup flew out of her hand, splashing onto the stairs, but luckily, it missed their clothes. Julian stopped, his heart pounding. "I am so sorry," he exclaimed. "Are you okay? Did it burn you?" This is a classic meet-cute, or an accidental encounter. Notice the verbs of movement: weaved, bumped, knocked, stumbled. These words convey the speed and lack of control Julian has. The collision is the inciting incident for this new part of the story. Julian's reaction shows his character. He is polite, even in a rush. He asks, "Did it burn you?" This shows he cares about safety more than his own delay. The woman's reaction will be key to how the story develops. Will she be angry? Or will she be understanding? Listen to how the dialogue reveals personality. The woman looked at the spilled coffee on the stairs, then looked at Julian. She was breathing hard from carrying the bags. She sighed, but then she shook her head. "No, it's fine," she said, sounding flustered. "It was an accident. I shouldn't have been carrying so much." Julian looked at his watch. "I have to catch a bus in 5 minutes," he said apologetically. "But let me help you with your bags. You're going up, I'm going down." The woman laughed softly, a dry, tired laugh. "You are in a rush, and you want to help me? That is very kind. But please, go catch your bus. I can manage." Julian hesitated. He looked at the clock again. 6:10 p.m. He had 5 minutes. Here we see a moment of character development. Julian is in a huge rush, yet he offers to help. This establishes him as a protagonist with good morals. The woman's laugh is described as dry and tired. This implies she is used to struggling or having a hard time. It adds depth to her character immediately. The phrase, "I shouldn't have been carrying so much," is a modal verb structure used for regret or self-criticism. This is a great grammar point to notice in context. Modal verbs like should have, could have, and would have are often used in narratives to show characters reflecting on their actions. Julian is now faced with a choice: help her and maybe miss his bus, or ignore her and run. This is a moral dilemma. "Which train are you catching?" Julian asked quickly. "The 6:20 to the coast," the woman replied. "Oh, that's platform 2, right next to my bus," Julian said. "Look, I'll help you carry these up, and then we can run down together. Deal?" The woman looked at him, surprised by his persistence. "Deal," she said. Julian took one of her heavy bags. It was much heavier than he expected. "What do you have in here, rocks?" he joked. The woman smiled, a genuine smile this time. "Books," she said. "I'm a teacher. Move in classrooms." They hurried up the stairs, placed the bags safely on the platform, and then turned to go back down. But as they reached the top of the stairs again, they heard a whistle. Julian looked over the railing. The bus to Oakhaven was pulling away. This is the climax of this specific scene. The consequence of Julian's kindness is that he misses his bus. The twist here is that his good deed cost him his ride home. In storytelling, this is often used to teach a lesson or force the character into a new situation. If he had caught the bus, the story would be over. Now, he is stuck. The interaction with the woman, who we now know is a teacher, adds a nice detail. The dialogue, "What do you have in here, rocks?" is a sarcastic joke, common in friendly interaction. The revelation that the bus is leaving creates a new problem. How will Julian get home? How will he react? Will he be angry? Julian stood frozen at the railing, watching the taillights of the bus disappear around the corner. "No, no, no," he whispered. The woman, whose name we still didn't know, stood beside him. She saw his face fall. "You missed it," she said softly. It wasn't a question. "Because I helped you," Julian said, his voice flat. He wasn't angry at her, just frustrated with the situation. He sat down on a nearby bench and put his head in his hands. "The next one isn't until tomorrow morning. I'm stuck here for the night." The woman sat down next to him, leaving a polite space between them. "I am so sorry," she said. "This is my fault. I should have just waited at the bottom of the stairs." Julian looked up and shook his head. "Don't be silly. It was my choice. I'm just tired. I really want to go home." The mood here shifts to one of disappointment and fatigue. The phrase, "his face fell," is another idiom meaning he looked sad or disappointed. Julian's reaction, putting his head in his hands, is a universal gesture of defeat. Notice the dialogue. Julian says, "Because I helped you," but then immediately softens it with, "Don't be silly." This shows conflict resolution within a conversation. He is frustrated, but he doesn't want to hurt the woman's feelings. The narrative here explores the cause and effect relationship. Cause, Julian helps. Effect, he misses the bus. This logic is the backbone of most storytelling. Understanding why things happen is crucial for listening comprehension. The woman looked at him sympathetically. "Listen," she said. "My name is Clara. Since you missed your bus because of me, the least I can do is offer you some company while you figure out what to do. I have over an hour until my train. There is a cafe right over there." She pointed to a small shop on the platform. "My treat." Julian looked at her. He didn't have any other plans. He couldn't sleep on the station floor. "Okay," he said, managing a weak smile. "I'm Julian, and I never say no to coffee, especially if I don't have to pay for it." They walked over to the cafe. It was a small comfort in the middle of a stressful evening. Here begins the falling action, or the development of the relationship. Clara is the woman's name. She feels responsible or guilty and wants to make amends. The phrase, "my treat," is a very common English expression, meaning "I will pay." It is used often in social situations. This transition moves the story from physical action, running, to dialogue, talking. Dialogue is where we learn about the characters' inner lives. In the next section, pay attention to what they talk about. It will likely move from small talk to deeper topics. This is the natural progression of conversation in English. Start with the weather or the immediate situation, and then move to personal topics. They sat at a small metal table near the window. Clara bought Julian a large black coffee and a sandwich. "You look like you need the energy," she said. Julian took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter and hot, exactly what he needed. "Thank you," he said. "You're a lifesaver." He took a bite of the sandwich. "So, you're a teacher?" he asked. Clara nodded. "History, at the high school in the next town. I was just moving some of my old books to the archives. I've been teaching there for 20 years. Julian whistled. 20 years? That is impressive. I bet you have some stories. Clara laughed. Oh, I have thousands of stories. Teenagers are, well, they are a unique species. She looked at his guitar case. And you? Are you a professional musician? Notice the flow of the conversation. They are engaging in small talk, but with a purpose. Julian uses the phrase, "You're a lifesaver," which is a hyperbole, an exaggeration to show gratitude. He isn't literally saving his life, but the coffee is very helpful. Clara asks about the guitar, picking up on a visual cue from earlier. In narratives, objects often serve as bridges between characters. The guitar represents Julian's identity. As he answers, we will learn more about his background. Julian nodded. I try to be. I've been touring for 3 months. Small gigs, mostly. Bars, weddings, sometimes street corners. It's not glamorous, but I love it. He strummed his fingers on the table. I was actually coming home to write some new songs. I feel stuck, like I'm playing the same things over and over. Clara listened intently. She had a teacher's way of listening, focused and patient. Maybe you just need a new perspective, she suggested. History is like that too. Sometimes you look at a period of time so much, you forget to look at what was happening around it. You need to step back to see the whole picture. Julian looked at her. That makes sense. I just feel like I'm running out of time. I'm 30 years old, and I haven't made it big yet. This dialogue reveals the internal conflict of the characters. Julian is struggling with his career and his self-worth. The phrase, "make it big," means to become very successful or famous. Clara offers advice using an analogy from her own job, history. Analogies are powerful tools in language. They compare two things to explain a concept. She compares music to study in history. This shared wisdom builds a bond between them. The setting of the train station at night creates an intimate atmosphere where strangers feel safe sharing personal secrets. This is a common trope in storytelling, the confessional moment. Clara smiled warmly. Julian, I am 50 years old. I didn't start teaching until I was 35. Before that, I was a waitress, a travel agent, and for 6 months, I sold vacuum cleaners door to door. We are all running at our own pace. Just because you haven't arrived yet, doesn't mean you are lost. Her words hung in the air. Julian felt a strange sense of calm. He had been so stressed about the missed bus, about the tour, about his career. But sitting here with this stranger, he felt okay. Thank you, Clara, he said sincerely. I think I needed to hear that. Maybe missing the bus wasn't such a bad thing after all. Here we reach the emotional resolution of the scene. Clara shares her own backstory, which creates a connection. This is the theme of the story, serendipity. Serendipity means finding good things by accident. Julian missed his bus, a bad thing, but found a wise friend, a good thing. The phrase, "her words hung in the air," suggests that the impact of her speech was strong and lasting. Julian's change in perspective is the true resolution. He came into the station stressed and impatient. He leaves the interaction calm and inspired. Suddenly, the station announcement system crackled to life. Attention passengers! The 6:20 train to the coast has been delayed by 40 minutes due to a signal failure. Clara groaned. Oh, great. Now I'm stuck too. But then she looked at Julian and grinned. Well, if we are both stuck, do you think you could play something for me? I have never had a private concert in a train station. Julian looked around. The station was emptier now. He unzipped his guitar case. For a history teacher who saved my sanity, I would be honored. He pulled out his acoustic guitar. The wood shone in the dim station light. He began to play a soft, melancholic melody. The music filled the empty hall, transforming the cold industrial space into something warm and magical. The story concludes with a shared moment of beauty. The external conflict, the delay, continues, but it no longer matters. The characters have found a solution in each other's company. The imagery here is important. The wood shone, dim station light, soft, melancholic melody. This sensory language closes the scene on an artistic note. The narrative structure was problem, missed bus, interaction, meeting Clara, crisis, stuck for the night, dialogue, sharing problems, and resolution, connection through music. This is a complete narrative arc within a larger context. Now that we have finished this second story, let's look at some specific listening strategies you can use. When you hear dialogue, pay attention to the tone. For example, when Clara first spoke to Julian, she sounded flustered and tired. Later, she sounded warm and wise. The words they use change as their relationship changes. At first, they used polite phrases like, "excuse me" and "I'm sorry." Later, they used more casual and personal language, like "my treat" and "sharing life stories." This shift in register, from formal to informal, is a key indicator of relationship development in English stories. If you can spot this shift, you truly understand the nuances of the language. Let's also review the vocabulary from this segment. We learned disheveled, messy, haste, speed/hurry, serendipity, happy accident, and the idiom make it big. Try to use these words in your own sentences. For example, you could say, "I arrived at the meeting looking disheveled because I ran all the way." Or, "It was pure serendipity that I met my old friend at the supermarket." Using new words immediately helps lock them into your memory. Another important aspect of following narratives is understanding the timeline. In this story, we had flash forwards and immediate consequences. The timeline was linear, meaning it went from point A to point B without jumping back in time. However, the characters talked about the past, Clara's previous jobs, Julian's tour. This is called exposition through dialogue. The author gives us background information without stopping the story. When you listen, try to separate the current action, sitting in the cafe, from the background information, Clara's past. This will help you stay oriented in the story. I want to do a quick comprehension check with you. Think back to the beginning. Why was Julian anxious? He was anxious because his train wasn't on the board, and he was in a rush. Why did he miss the bus? He missed it because he stopped to help Clara with her bags. What was in Clara's bags? Her bags were full of books because she is a history teacher. How did the story end? They were both delayed, so Julian played guitar for Clara. If you can answer these questions, your listening comprehension is strong. If you missed one, don't worry. That is why we practice. Repetition is the mother of learning. We will continue our practice now with a final short narrative that focuses on a puzzle. This will test your ability to listen for specific details and instructions. Imagine a character named Marcus. Marcus loves puzzles. One day, he received a mysterious email. The email had no subject line. It just said, "Go to the library. Find the book with the red cover published in 1952. The answer is on page 52. Marcus was confused but curious. He went to the library. He found the section with old books. He searched and searched. Finally, he found a red book. He checked the date, 1952. He opened it to page 52. There, written in pencil, was a riddle. I have keys but no locks. I have a space but no room. You can enter but never go outside. What am I? Marcus thought hard. Keys but no locks? Space but no room? He looked at the book in his hand. He smiled. A keyboard, he whispered. This short puzzle story tests your understanding of riddles and descriptions. The riddle, I have keys but no locks, refers to a keyboard. Did you guess it? Listening to riddles is excellent practice because it forces you to think about the double meanings of words. Keys can be metal keys for doors, or keys on a piano or computer. Space can be a physical area, or the space bar on a keyboard. Enter can mean to go inside a room, or the enter key. This play on words is central to English humor and storytelling. As we come to the end of this extensive practice session, I want to thank you for your dedication. We have traveled through 3 different narratives today. We solved a mystery with Elena, navigated a travel crisis with Julian and Clara, and solved a riddle with Marcus. You have practiced listening for setting, character, conflict, resolution, tone, and vocabulary. You have learned words like determination, coincidence, disheveled, and serendipity. You have practiced visualizing scenes and predicting outcomes. This is real progress. Remember, learning a language is like solving a puzzle. It takes time, patience, and practice. Every story you listen to is a piece of that puzzle. I encourage you to take these stories and retell them. Try to tell Elena's story to a friend or family member. Try to summarize Julian's experience. The act of retelling cements the language in your brain. It moves the vocabulary from your passive understanding, what you hear, to your active use, what you speak. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Mistakes are just part of the journey. Just like Elena falling down led her to the key, your mistakes in speaking can lead you to new understanding. If you enjoyed this session, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to English in Fluency. We have many more stories, lessons, and practice sessions coming your way. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. You can also leave a comment below. Tell me which story was your favorite. Was it the mystery, the travel story, or the puzzle? I would love to hear from you. Your comments help me create better content for you. Thank you for joining me, Alex, on this journey through English storytelling. I hope you feel more confident, more fluent, and more inspired. Keep listening, keep practicing, and keep telling your stories. Until next time, goodbye and happy learning.